So, how is everybody? I hope everyone's well. Weather's fine where you are, nice and warm. Certainly at this end, it's been a lovely day. Not too hot, just right, I thought, just perfect. Okay, so just a little bit of a background in terms of the topic that we're going to be doing this evening, just to tell you my interest in it. So basically, some time ago, I had to do some work for one of my employers who was having a little bit of a tough time with students in clinical placements. So they directed me to explore an issue which really I hadn't thought about myself. You know, we take things for granted, don't we? Sometimes I find we sort of just hang along, or we do things without thinking about them. But anyway, I was charged with exploring this topic, doing some work, some research, and with making sure that I did sessions to update our students. So really, that was what happened. I got them out of a sticky spot, I think, by running some sessions for them. And this session that I'm going to be doing with you today is coming from that background, okay? So, but why are we doing it here? I mean, what's the relevance to us? Well, I think that if there ever was a time when we need to engage with issues relating to boundaries, it is now. I think, you know, we're all aware of the issues that are taking place around us in terms of social structures and in terms of our church. Yeah, there are lots and lots of issues that are happening, and we can't be blind to them. I don't think that we can ignore them. I think it's important that we engage with what's happening around us and make sure that we understand them so that we can contribute to, if you like, making things a little bit better. So really, that's where this is actually coming from. So I've got some slides I'm going to be sharing with you all, and I'll just load them now. Let's go to share screen. All right. You seeing that, everybody?
Yes.
All right. Okay, so boundaries in love and relationships, understanding our responsibilities. All right, so as I said, if there's ever a time that we need to engage with the issues of understanding boundaries, it is now. And I believe that this is really a timely subject. And I was glad that I'd had a chance to explore it in the past. But what I've done this time is I've adapted it for the purposes of this group, since I think we're all single in SDAs here. I've added the spiritual / biblical aspects, as I think they bring a very, very important dimension to the discourse for us all as people of faith. Okay. So in terms of the overall aims of the session, what I want to do is to try and make sure that we raise our awareness of our roles and our responsibilities in our personal, in our social, and in our love relationships, and in our everyday interactions. Because, you know, if something's helping you with your love life, then it's going to help you with the way you're actually relating to other people around you, even in the workplace, actually. So that's the main aim, really. The other aim that I hope we'll achieve by the time we're finished here this evening is to draw in information from a variety of disciplines. And I've mentioned Bible principles, but I'm also going to be drawing on principles of communication, which I'm sure you're all aware of. And some of the principles are from psychology. I think they're important for us to engage with as well. Thirdly, I hope that this session will encourage us as individuals or as groups to reflect and think. And I've got some case histories coming up later on where you'll get a chance to participate and to perhaps share your own thoughts on these issues, because really that's how learning takes place. And lastly, I hope that we'll foster an attitude of willingness to modify behaviors as and when required. You know, it's quite easy sometimes to dismiss things as well. It doesn't happen in my area. It's not important for me, but actually we're all in this world and we're sharing space together at some time or the other. And we all need to be aware of really how we can make things better for ourselves and for other people. Okay. So like I said, I'm going to be using Bible-based and SDA resources. Specifically, I've put here Exodus chapter 20 as one of the things that we will touch on: responsibilities towards God and responsibilities towards our fellow humans. So, you know, this isn't something that's new to any of us. We're all aware of this, and we have a clear idea. I think sometimes we may, you know, there's a lot of problems around. So obviously there are some issues. We will draw on psychological theories, and the one that I've got here is a book by a guy called Eric Berne. It's a classic text. It's quite old, but actually it's a really important text which talks about games people play. And it's really interesting because, you know, what this book explores is the psychology of human relationships and the things we do to communicate, the games we play when trying to communicate. And of course, any other good psychology text, if you're a student of psychology, and some of you may be, you will perhaps be aware of texts specifically relating to underlying principles of human relationships. So you may have some things you know you might want to share with us or later on. Right, so I have drawn up some basic ground rules for this session. Forgive me, folks, I'm an educator. I do this a lot in my own teaching, or did it a lot in my own teaching. I'm not directly teaching now, but this is something I did quite a lot of. So this is a training session, and parts of it may be interactive by invitation. So I may invite some comments depending on what I'm covering as I'm going through. For example, we have got some case scenarios coming up later on, so I will invite people to look at those. Either in small groups or perhaps as a large group, but we'll see how we get on with those. Secondly, queries and comments, as we're going through, you can pop those in the chat, okay? However, we don't aim to respond to them until the very end of the session. You can put your comments, you can put your queries, but at the end of the presentation, we will actually explore them all and discuss and respond to them as appropriate. Thirdly, I do want to remind us that this space that we're in, as single Seventh-day Adventists, ought to be a safe learning space. And since I'm running, I'm going to say that it is a safe learning space. And I'm using the word learning because I do think that's important for all of us. There's something for me to learn and something for all of us to perhaps learn. However, I do need to say that you only need to share information when we get to your sharing. You only need to share information about yourselves which you're comfortable with and which will not make you feel vulnerable. All right, so that I need to make very clear. And any information you share about other people, you have to share it confidentially. In other words, we cannot identify them. Nobody should be able to identify them. So you need to make sure that it's confidential. The last thing I need to just point out here is that we do expect everybody to respect individual contributions, whether or not you agree. It's irrelevant. Just respect the contribution, respect people's confidentiality, respect people's right to an opinion and to having a voice, whoever they may be. Now, in our discipline, we call that Chatham House rules. And basically all it means is that, you know, the safe space in which people can actually express themselves. Others in that space must understand that if they repeat any of that information outside without ensuring strict confidentiality, they would have broken the rules. So that is all that means. So really, it's quite important for us to make sure that we just respect each other. And that we should know that we're Seventh-day Adventists, people of faith, and we shouldn't really have to tell each other that. All right. Last thing I can say is that this isn't a long session, so you won't get too bored, hopefully. I know learning can be a bit tedious sometimes. All right, then. So let's get into the issue of boundaries.
Can we make this just bigger?
Right. Now you're complicating matters. How do I do that?
At the top where it says autosave.
Right. Let me move the. Okie dokie. Okay, then. So we've done overall aims, we've done information sources, we've looked at ground rules, and we're looking at boundaries. All right, so it's a pretty simple definition: a line which marks the limits of an area, a dividing line. In other words, you can go this far and no further. And in fact, we have many examples of clear boundaries in the Bible. And I've started with Exodus chapter 19, verses 12 and 13. Now, I'm not intending to read these, folks. You can, you all know these. You can copy them down and check them out later on. Chapter 20, of course, are the 10 commandments. And we're all aware of those. Okay. I mean, the question we could ask ourselves is, we have clear guidelines about boundaries, and yet we have so many problems with them. Well, we know the reasons for that, don't we? As people of faith, we know that we are constantly being challenged by the arch enemy, who knows that he can tempt us, and in many instances he succeeds. But we have got clear guidelines in terms of boundaries, and we do need to perhaps keep ourselves perhaps a little bit more aware of them in our day-to-day interactions with each other. So I'm picking out 3 specific types of boundaries here, which we're going to look at as we go through. The physical boundary based around personal or individual spaces. Psychological boundaries really based around guarding our emotional and mental health. Now, a lot of people don't realize that really you are responsible as an individual for taking steps to guard your own mental and emotional health and not allow people to erode it. And there are many ways that we can do that. As people of faith, we've got lots of great ways, and one of the best ways, of course, as we know, we do that every day, is have a daily devotion, spend time with God in prayer. But we also have to learn to perhaps challenge people who insist on eroding our emotional and mental health. And you may have to tell them. And if, I've certainly given people advice and said, just if you have nothing else to say, just say, depart from me, whatever you want to use. But basically, it is our responsibility to guard our emotional and mental health. And to do that, you may have to challenge other people, in terms of what they're saying to you. There are many examples. Some of you might be able to share some later on of examples of things people say that are aimed at eroding your emotional mental health. Right now in the UK, we've got a very big emphasis on mental health and well-being. And, it's long overdue. Of course, it happened because, many, I think of the royals, Harry, for example, and perhaps others, have started to speak up and speak out and share their own experiences of their mental health being damaged. And basically what we need to sort of be aware of. I know that there's a big stigma around this issue of mental health. Lots and lots of people don't really want to talk about it because they think, and perhaps they are by some people perceived differently, simply because they have a mental health challenge or difficulty. But it really is very, very common among us. It's very common in our faith. It's very common in the community, probably is common in your workplace. And so it's something that we have to understand, that it is our responsibility to guard our emotional and mental health and well-being. All right, so in terms of boundaries, we want to talk quickly here about God's specific rules. And what I've done here is I've put 3 examples, and none of them are new to any of you. I know that you're all aware of them, and I'm going to start with Uzzah. Okay, and some of you will remember this. Uzzah, of course, from the time of David. You'll all remember what he did. I'm sure I don't have to remind you, but I will anyway. But you know, the reason why I started with Uzzah is because what I have found from my experience, lots of people have great intentions. You know, you usually hear the saying, I didn't mean it, or, you know, I didn't mean any harm. I was only trying to be nice. I was trying to be kind. I didn't mean to offend. All right. And I'm sure Uzzah did not mean to offend. All right. But hey, what happened to Uzzah? Okay, and let's remember, of course, that David was angry with God. That's what the Bible says. I'm going to let you go afterwards and sort that out. I'm not going to go into specific detail of that, but it's there. And, you know, if you want to make comments in the chat, you can do, or put aspects of that in the chat, you can do. But Uzzah was a man of great intentions. And, you know, it sticks out for me because when I hear people say, oh, I don't mean any harm, or I didn't mean any harm, and you know, I didn't set out to offend. And sometimes people even get upset and annoyed that other people are offended by their behavior. Okay, and what tends to happen is the person who's the victim ends up taking the blame. You know, why are you getting upset about such a simple matter? Okay, but we do need to be aware that we cannot make assumptions about other people. We don't know what their experiences are. We don't know where they're coming from. We don't know what has happened to them. And as such, we really ought not to be making assumptions about them and how they should react or how they shouldn't react. This happens not just among us in our faith community, but it also happens in the workplace quite a lot, actually. So, you know, sometimes people who speak out in the workplace end up getting labeled, whether it's as troublemaker or as not being all together there or whatever. So, you know, this is a common issue that happens not just in our church, but we're here as a faith community. And I think it's great if we can start to address issues ourselves. Something else that people sometimes say alongside the issue of I didn't mean any ill. Uzzah was trying to save the ark, remember? I think the oxes that were drawing the ark were stumbling, and Uzzah, with all his good intention, reached out to stop it from falling. I mean, what's wrong with that? David asked, because David was angry with God. That's what the Bible says. And we might think it was a rather harsh decision that you know, Uzzah was killed immediately. Very, very harsh. And it's something that I have thought about when I've read through and meditated on that, and I've thought, you know, we cannot take for granted specific rules, whether it's rules that God has given to us or personal rules people make for themselves, or even rules in society. And we're going to come to some of those later on. And of course, we also have Moses. We all know the story of Moses and what happened with him. We don't really have to spend a lot of time going through that. But again, Moses, whom we know God loved so much because, you know, he took him to heaven eventually. However, when Moses actually ignored the specific rule that God gave him, what happened to him? Okay, we know what happened. All right. And, you know, we have to sort of be aware of that as well, and remember that it's important for us to take note of these biblical spiritual boundaries. I've mentioned Samson. We know that when Samson gave away the secret to his strength, his hair was cut off and God didn't save him. Okay, he lost his strength. And how did he regain it? His hair had to grow back. And the specific rule that had been given to his family was he must never cut his hair, because in his hair is his strength. just 3 examples, and you might all be able to come up with some more spiritual examples of God's specific rules to us. And if anybody wants to argue about, rules, well, we could argue forever, couldn't we? But we're not going to. We're just going to be reminded that rules are given for our own good, aren't they? They're actually given to help us in our daily interactions and in our daily lives, to keep us safe, and they were given out of love. You wouldn't think so sometimes, in today's social spaces, actually, but certainly we need to remember that. Okay, so, all right, I've perhaps said why it's important today, but I'm going to just go through that again here and say that, you can go and look these up yourselves, folk, all right? Because it's okay to spend a little time, self-development time, doing a bit of learning for ourselves. We all have a responsibility to do that. That's something I've always done, even outside of the education arena. I've always been extremely curious, too nosy, if you like, want to find things out. So it's okay to just, give yourselves maybe half an hour a week to do a bit of checking out for yourselves, if, whatever. But certainly SDA Church evidence currently on rates of divorce and remarriage, we know that they're quite high. And the question is, should we really be ignoring those statistics? And what should we be doing about them? Well, I think personally what we should be doing is we should be thinking about them and thinking, what part we've played in that, because some of us, not all of us, some of us have been married. So that means that we've actually played a part in some of these issues. All right. So, we need to be looking at ourselves and looking at the stats and asking ourselves personal questions. I find that sometimes it's very easy to ask questions of other people or criticize other people, blame other people. But in many instances, the best way of dealing with these issues is to ask ourselves the questions. What was it I missed? And I find that when we take responsibility personally, that really is the beginning of the healing process. That's when we begin to grow, if you like, spiritually, because we have taken charge, we have taken responsibility, and we've talked to God about it. And we can begin to move on. Until we've done that, I have found it's a big problem. So you can go look at the divorce statistics in our church, the divorce and remarriage rates, okay? Our policies, SDA policy on divorce and remarriage, and some of the historical developments and the impact of that on SDA couples. That is all available, and anyone can sort of go and look that up. So we do know as well that something else which impacts on why we ought to be aware of what we're discussing here, boundaries, is that we do have current SDA statistics on ratios of men to women in the church. And we know that the ratios are actually very unequal in relation to men. There's many more women than there are men, okay? And if anybody ever gets the chance to engage with her, some of you may know her, some of you may have read her work, some of you may have heard her speak, because I know she speaks quite widely, and she actually runs sessions for singles. All right, and that's Alan. She actually, Bernard, so her name is Alan. I can't remember her first name now. But anyway, she's written a text or done some work around singleness and the Black woman, and the implications for us we have to look at. What she's found is that in her evidence was that single Black women in our church are actually opting or choosing not to bother with marriage or finding a partner or setting up love relationships. And the question is, why are women, most women, we're not saying all of them, I don't think she, but she did some work. And this is her conclusion, that the women are actually choosing, and she spoke to a lot of SDA single women. And we probably know many women, I certainly do, and you probably will too, who have. But, I'm assuming that women who are here are happy to carry on searching. And I don't think there's anything wrong with searching at all. So why is it that women are choosing not to bother? And shouldn't this concern us? What is happening in our church to actually cause this kind of trend? Really something I believe that we ought to be considering. Okay. So I believe boundary setting is everyone's business. And in our society and social structures, we know that it brings order to everyday life and activities, and it makes sure that roles are clearly understood. And again, I've put some examples here, and again, I know you all are aware of these. Everybody knows that if you cross a traffic light, you could end up, if it's on red and you decide to go through it, you could end up killing yourself, and you could say worse, you end up killing somebody else. All right. That is perhaps the most the biggest one that I think I've put in that list. All right. So nobody could argue that traffic lights are really important on the road. And if you've ever been in an area of traffic where there are no lights, and you see traffic coming from 6 different points in a square, then you can appreciate the confusion that happens, can't you, when that takes place. So it is really quite important for people to be aware that that is an important rule, and you break it at your own risk. And of course, we have perhaps less serious rules, although they can be just as challenging. You standing in line or queuing, as we call it here in the UK. You have to queue, and if you don't queue, then you're going to get up somebody's back or up their neck or whatever. Okay, it's a requirement for order, and it's a requirement for getting things done. I know of I've been to places where people think it's okay to jump queues, but it's not appropriate, and it's bad behavior. And so we're aware of that. The other issue, of course, is turn taking to speak, which of course is an important issue. In many instances, you are expected to wait one's turn or to ask to speak. That is also an issue relating to boundary. And the last one I've placed here is the expectations of behavior if you're in public office. Now, we know that that's something which is so questionable, because people have broken that so many times. We don't even want to go down there. But I know that you know many examples. We've had a number of people being charged, for example, over the COVID rules. They made the rules and then they broke them themselves. Very interesting. All right, but they've had to pay big fines, I've been told. I hope that they've paid them. All right. So in social structures and society, very important for us to be aware of. Now, in personal everyday relationships, what happens is having boundaries reduces confusion, reduces misunderstanding, and it actually improves personal contentment, mental health, physical health, and personal happiness. And that, that could be at home, that could be at school, that could be at church, could be at work, or it could be between individuals. So, we cannot really take these for granted. And all of you will know, if you've got kids or haven't, you still know you've been children. Children need clear details about boundaries and consequences. And where these aren't followed through, if boundaries which have been set are not followed through for the children, so if children ignore or break boundaries and they're not followed through with whatever the consequences were that were promised, then you've actually confused the child, okay, and make life really difficult for that child as they become older, because they grow up thinking that actually boundaries are for breaking, because there are no consequences, or that adults are just playing games. So it's really quite important that children are given clear rules about the boundaries that they are expected to adhere to at home. We know that, you know, that this happens at school. What we know has happened in the past is that some children, again, inconsistency in terms of how these rules are applied and how they're actually seen through. So, for example, some children may be punished and others may not. And that happens in families too. That some children in a family may be punished, and some of you may have had those experiences where you were punished and your sibling wasn't. I certainly have experiences from school where I was punished for something I did and the other child that was involved was not. But having said that, I have to say the teacher did try to explain to me afterwards. So, you know, he tried to make me understand why I was punished and the other child wasn't. But it's quite important to be aware of that. And then in love relationships, well, having boundaries ensures clarity, it promotes trust, it strengthens partnerships, and it actually improves bonding. So the boundaries of interaction with our spouses, even with strangers, with family, and with community are really, really essential to our well-being generally. Okay, and we really must stay aware of the fact that they really are our business. Boundaries are our business. We have to be aware of them, and we have to make sure that we bear them in mind at all times. All right, then, so I've put here some common examples, and you know these, but I'm going to go through them, starting the first one, which is your home. And we have a common saying here in the UK that an Englishman's home is his castle. It's a common saying, and I think most of you will have heard it, and I'm sure you know what that means. Okay, that's a place where he or she, you know, a man or woman's home, we could probably say. They can go and they can be themselves, and they don't expect the space to be violated. Okay, and your body and your personal space. So from a biblical perspective, we know that our Bible tells us quite clearly that our bodies are the temples of the living God. We somehow tend to forget that at times, but it's quite important that we remind ourselves that we have a responsibility to God for ensuring that we set up boundaries in terms of our bodies and our personal space. Now, personal space, of course, could be your room, a room in a home that is yours, that should not really be violated unless people make sure that, you know, it's clear what they're actually doing. And of course, personal things, toiletries, personal garments, toothbrushes, clothes, etc. Those areas are, you know, important aspects of our personal spaces, and we wouldn't be happy if people actually violated those spaces. Now, again, people might disagree. I certainly know of a case. I remember somebody telling me about one of their friends who came to their home to visit, headed to the wardrobe and just helped themselves to her clothes, and she wasn't very pleased about it. But you know, so there you go. When I challenged her to talk to the friend about it, and she did, she said, the friend said, "Oh, I thought we were friends and it was okay for me to do that." So there you go. Another issue relating to boundaries, and that I thought was an interesting one. All right, we mentioned earlier on your mind. We know that the Bible makes it very clear that we ought to be guarding the avenues of our minds. There's actually a lot of reference made to this in the Spirit of Prophecy. I've mentioned the Adventist home, but there are a few others. I believe that there are references, and some of you may be aware of some of these references, about ensuring that the avenues of the mind are guarded. And I think we may have touched on some of these in our Monday evening Bible readings that we've recently been doing. We know that unless we protect our minds, we could fall prey to all sorts of issues relating to sin and its hold over us. And we've discussed some of those, so I'm not going to go back through those. If you've been coming to our Bible sessions, you would have gone through some of those. Now, the fourth one I've put here is your workspace. And I know I've put office space because some people do have a personal office, but even where people do not have a personal office, if you were to go into an open office where everybody actually has desks, large space, and everybody's in this space working, you'll actually find, if you go around and take notes, you'll find that people actually set for themselves small boundaries. They may use a cardboard box, they may use their books, they may use their laptop or their computer, but they certainly somehow block out their own spaces, okay, so that is their personal private space. And of course, we know that your laptop or your PC, which is password protected, is meant to protect your individual details and your access, and it's not something you share with every Tom, Dick, and Mary. Okay, so the other example, number 5, is your love and marriage relationships. Now, there are biblical and there are also social expectations of exclusivity. We know that they're constantly under threat because the devil's quite busy. We know he's out to destroy families and relationships. We know that. But do we keep ourselves reminded of this? And what do we do to ensure that we are not a part of the problem? These are very important issues that we have to be aware of. Now, I know I say there's social expectations, and there are, but we know that these are also always being challenged out there in society. So many examples, okay, and we are all aware of some of them, perhaps. The Bible is very clear about how we should handle ourselves in our love and marriage relationships. And it is important that we understand those boundaries. We're going to be touching a little bit more in some of these when we get down to the scenarios. I've got some scenarios that you all get a chance to participate in later on. And then, of course, there's family and friend relationships. Once again, all need to be boundary protected. And the term that I use this also when I did this training for my organization. Never make assumptions, ever. And I believe this is something that we should also be very, very clear about. We cannot make any assumptions, no matter your good intentions. It is wrong to make assumptions. And of course, in order to reduce the likelihood of assumptions, you really need what I call basic communication skills. I don't even think that they have to be extensive. Okay, basic communication skills. I think one of the things that tends to happen when it comes to telling people what your boundaries are is a lot of people want to be nice. They don't want to upset anybody. So, they don't want to say things that may sound unkind. If you say to somebody, that's my space, and people perhaps might not be happy. Certainly in the church, it's not very nice to do that, and we shouldn't be doing that in the church. But certainly when it comes to relationships with other people, we must make sure that the boundaries are understood by the other people that we're actually dealing with. And to do that, we have to communicate. We've got to say something. One of the best ways I find of communicating without upsetting anybody is to ask questions. Is it okay if I do that? Or should I go over there? Or is it all right if I stay here? Or, whatever. But it's up to us. The burden is on us to actually make opportunities or find ways of ensuring that people get a chance to express their own ideas about their boundaries and how they want those to be handled. Now, these points I've put here, I didn't put them in order of importance, so I just need to say that. But certainly, you know, for you, some of these may be more important than others. For me, I have to say here that the most important one on this list for me is number 3. I do believe guarding the avenues of our minds is really a very, very important issue. And sometimes when we do that, it becomes a bit easier to manage the rest. So that's my personal choice. You might want to choose one, and you may want to tell us when we come on to comments and questions and discussion about why you decided on which one. I think following on from that, it would be love and marriage relationships. Okay, but certainly body and personal space also. I mean, they're all very important, you know, but you might find one more important than the other. Okay, all right, so across the lifespan, we have specific times when boundaries are very important to everybody. And I've started here with childhood and adolescents and young adults up to 18 years old. And here in the UK, it's a legal requirement. Now, it's 16 years, I think, in some parts of the UK, or relating to some things, not everything. But certainly here in the UK safeguarding requirements are very, very important, and they may be related to emotional, physical, or sexual boundaries. And I do need to say here, of course, that what we need to be aware of and understand, and some of you will know, because I know some of you work in service sectors, every adult in the UK has a responsibility to protect the boundaries of this group, and they're classed as being vulnerable, of course. You know, if a child tells you something, or if you know that something is happening to a child and you do nothing about it and it becomes known, then, you know, they might want to hold you responsible. That's all that means. So everybody has a responsibility to protect and safeguard the boundaries of children and young adults. And the legal age is up to 18 years. Now, in terms of adulthood and even love relationships, adults do have a personal responsibility for setting their own rules. Generally speaking, sometimes that's lacking simply because it's not well understood, and it is slightly problematic in some of today's social structures. And like I said earlier on, lots of people do not want to offend, so they sometimes, you know, say nothing. They're quiet, or they let people get away with stuff because they don't really want to not be nice. A lot of people are worried about what other people think about them, and so on. They don't want to be considered to be aggressive, you know, if they're sort of setting their own boundary rules, even in terms of their personhood and you know, and how people relate to them. But certainly this is something that can be done, and even if it means you have to sit down and work out how you're going to do it, and review it and revise it every day, and you know, then it's something that really we ought to be engaging with. Now, during middle age, there are lots and lots of assumptions which are based on issues like personal status and expectations. And what happens here is that, you know, individual decision making is required. And of course, what is important is that respect is shown and the rights of everyone is actually considered. So middle age is a time when, you know, boundaries are challenged. I mean, they're challenged all the way throughout, but certainly at this point in life, then, you know, people are dealing with a range of issues to do with work. So, for example, if people are out of work, it may actually hit their self-esteem and may actually bring on issues in terms of how they relate to setting boundaries about themselves and their life. So there are lots of issues for us to consider here. Now, in later years, in a lot of societies, and not all, I know that there's certain parts of the world where senior people do get a lot of respect, but there is a tendency in our culture to show disrespect to senior people. There is a tendency, and that's what the literature and the research shows. All right. There are some misunderstandings. Those misunderstandings may be around personal expectations, around emotional issues, and the abuse, or the breaking of boundaries may relate to physical issues, to financial issues, and again, this is a vulnerable group. The UK classes seniors over 65 as a vulnerable group. So UK safeguarding is required. And by the way, I need to say here that boundaries are broken not just by strangers, but sometimes by people's family members even. And there's a lot of evidence to show that there are times when family members also break personal boundaries, physical boundaries, financial boundaries. And there's a lot of evidence to show that this is going on. So just to sort of highlight those aspects for us to be aware of. Okay. All right, so we're on to, great. We're on to our scenarios, folk, which is lovely, because here's where you're going to get a chance to share your views. And I've put these scenarios up for you. And if we could do these, and I don't know how many people are online, our admin might be able to put us into group. There are 4 scenarios, and what might be the best thing to do is to put have 4 groups if possible. Eve, are you able to set up some breakout rooms for us? Is that going to be possible, or do you think? All right, yes. So just sharing an example of something that happened. I met a 14-year-old child as part of my work, and this child was 8 months pregnant. Okay, and she arrived in labor. She was actually in labor, and her parents didn't know. So, you know, the parent who brought her, she'd lived at home all the time, and like she carried this child for 8 months in her mother's presence every day, and mom didn't know that she was pregnant. And when that was explored, what we got told was that all right, yeah, boyfriend stayed over, slept over once in a while, plus mom had sent the child away on holiday abroad somewhere, leaving the boy's mother in charge, saying, you know, you're in charge of her, whatever, you know. So that's just an example of something that I'm aware of. I know that lots and lots of family members are worried about setting boundaries. Okay, but the girl was pregnant, and you know, mother almost didn't want to own up to it. How did this happen? She was asking. That's a question she was actually asking. How did this happen? And then in the other breath, she's saying, yes, she's been away to X on holiday, to Spain or wherever on holiday with her boy, with the family of the boy. There was a boy, and there's, you know, with that family, she was sent away on holiday with them. So, you know, there's another issue in terms of boundaries. But, you know, all I can say is hooray to that mother who told you, clear up, you know, that she doesn't expect you to sleep together, and, you know, and allowed you, and you respected that. So that's an important point to make. So having the talk with family members is such an important issue. And I know that lots and lots of people are petrified of doing that. And, you know, I think, again, to raise our awareness, we have to consider how we respond when we're faced with these dilemmas, because, you know, they'll happen to anybody. And what I'm going to suggest is that you need a strategy to handle those problems. So I don't know whether anyone else wants to share anything very quickly before we move on to the next case. From a personal perspective, I can say here that certainly I make sure that every family member of mine is very clear that in my home, nobody sleeps together unless they're married. Okay, straight up front. And you know, I don't care if they're many of them are not Seventh-day Adventists. So before I get into any hot water, I make it very clear before anybody even comes to visit. You know, nobody's sleeping together unless they're married. If you're married, yes, I have a room ready for you. You're not married, you're not coming, or you come, but you go to the hotel and just come and visit in the daytime. You've got to set your own rules and be brave enough to do that and have your own boundaries. It's up to individuals.
So Naomi, that prompts again to stop.
I'm sorry?
I'm saying what you said earlier on prompted me to quote the same question to you personally now. What if say the girlfriend sleep over in a separate room, yes? But tomorrow morning you have to leave for work early. What do you do? What do you
Well,
say
that's
to
another
them?
scenario, isn't it? I mean, I'm not, you know, do you know what? I'm going to be honest here and speak now from a personal perspective and say that I do not encourage any visiting from my boyfriend and girlfriend family members. You know, I do not encourage them to visit me. I give them local, you know, they have to stay in local hotels or local bed and breakfasts or whatever. I personally do not. I'm telling you the truth. You know, so I mean, luckily, I'm really not worried about what people may think, which is quite important, you know, because like I said, I do know a lot of people are very, very worried about falling out with family members. Well, not me. I don't encourage them, and they don't come if they're boyfriend and girlfriend. You know, and you know what they do in their own space, you know, is fine, but not in my home. So that's to me, you know, it's something you manage yourself, I would say, Brother Lambert.
Can
Because,
I say,
yeah,
go ahead,
carry
Lambert.
Now it's a very good try.
Well, everybody's got to set their own standards. You know, we're all individuals, and you know, we're not cloned. We're all individuals. We all have different ideas. People will disagree with me here, but it's entirely up to each of us how we want to manage that situation, I think.
I guess
Eve.
as well, sorry, regarding Brother Lambert question, Brother Lambert have been at my in-laws many times, and we slept, we spent days. They're not gonna sit around and watch us. They're gone out, and we are at home, but I've respect them in such a way that there are certain things I would not do in our home. So I guess it boils down to respecting the individual, and that is why it's very important to make your stand. So we know our boundaries. I know when to step over. I know what line not to be crossed. When there's no boundary, then look at this young man. Jerry went in, he was flirting, he was carrying on. And Sally didn't have a boundary and respect for herself as well. Because if she had, she would not be there. Once I saw all the other women, I would try to ask questions, you know. And sometimes men do flirt. And some women see it as a way as, oh, I'm in a relationship. No. So, you know, boundaries are very important.
Sister Eve, you were going to say something.
Yes,
Thank
I was
you.
going to say, it's very important when you're speaking to someone to find out where you are, what you are. Are you friends? Are you now dating? Because when you assume that the male can turn around and say, well, I didn't say we were going steady. You know, it's the assumption, as you spoke about in the beginning, that you cannot just assume what you think is happening. You want to ask the question and get confirmation, because he might just say, just like you, want to get to know you a bit more before I decide that you're my girlfriend, and then you know where you are. And even so, I'm very surprised that Christian people would have their, you know, a young man and a young woman sleeping in the same house. And not only that, that others can come and go as well. You know, all of his dating should be taking place outside, not inside the house. It's
Okay. I mean,
yeah, as
you know,
said, boundaries being broken everywhere.
yes. And at the end of the day, everyone's at fault because, you know, at the very beginning, Jerry sending a large bunch of flowers with poems to this girl is a really great big suggestion, isn't it? to do something like that. So everybody's at fault here, and it's just recognizing for each of us here to understand that there are things we need to find out, like Sister Eva's just said, and ensure that we know what this is all about, and what the plans are, if there are any plans at all. Okay, so it's quite important to do that. So thank you for that. All right, I'm going to move on from that case now and go on to the second case. It's a smaller case, and hopefully everyone will find it. All right, so if somebody'd like to read this case for us, and if not, then it'd be great if somebody can read it, because I'm talking a lot, and it's nice if someone could read it loud and clear.
Read it.
Sorry?
I can read it. Can you hear me well?
Yeah, go for it. Yeah.
Case studies number 2. Johnny and Alice had been dating for a few months and were on the verge of getting engaged. Whenever they met up to spend time together, Johnny was constantly on his mobile phone, texting, checking social media, and taking calls. They would begin a conversation, then he would interrupt to take a call from one of his friends. On a couple of occasions, Johnny would ask her to excuse him while he goes outside to take a confidential call. When she asked who it was, he would just say a friend. Alice began to get worried and tried to engage Johnny in a discussion about the issue, but he said she was too jealous and suspicious. He also said just because he wanted to marry her doesn't mean he plans to abandon his friends for her. Question: identify the boundary issues, suggest how they could be resolved.
Thank you so much, sis. Okay, folks, so come on now. Tell us what you think about this one. This is a little bit more sort of in line with everybody, isn't it? The phone,
Well,
I mean, the iPhone. Okay, go. Yeah.
I was going to say there's so many things, but I'll start with, I would say, sharing how you feel in real time. After a few times that you're with someone and you feel like the time is bad, in that they are always being interrupted and your time is not prioritized, is not the priority of the moment or the hour or the couple of hours, then, you might want to consider rescheduling to another time, or saying, we only have 2 hours. It's really uncomfortable to have all of these calls and texts unless it's an emergency. Can we agree that when we're together, because we're only together for just a few hours, that we prioritize this time together? Like, really just finding the words to say it kindly without an attitude, and so that you are expressing your desire to focus on them, and that you too could be texting, checking social media, but you've chosen to prioritize this time by not doing that as much as you normally would had you been alone. And you'd like them to consider prioritizing that relationship too. And if they can't, then maybe you go from there.
Thank you for
if
that.
if they can't agree to only take emergency calls, or just say, when you come, say, hey, I'm expecting an emergency call. I don't know, my mother is coming out of surgery and my sibling is going to tell me how it is, and so I need to take this call. Should be around 2. Just out of respect, because it's disrespectful. It's not prioritizing the time. And even if you were with a buddy or a relative, they would say the same thing. It has actually nothing to do with being in a non-platonic relationship. That's general common courtesy.
Thank you so much for that. Anybody else wants to add anything else to that? That covers it, I would imagine. But if you want to, anybody else wants to come in with any other additional comments on that case, you're welcome to do so now. Anybody? Or has everybody gone quiet again?
Well, I just wanted to, I guess, add that, that is definitely a red flag. he clearly is not showing her or giving her the attention that she is requiring from him, that definitely is a red flag. To me, being that, you know, he's always being interrupted by his phone calls, and, you know, he's always on his phone, either texting if he's not talking, or on social media. So it's as if, you know, it's as if he's choosing to spend more time on his phone than with her. So if she is not wanting that, then she needs to, you know, recognize it and move on. You know, simple as that. And if she's
Okay.
okay with him being on his phone, and she's okay with it, then, you know, she'll accept what he gives her. So if you don't want it, you just move on.
Thank you. Nobody else wants to come in on top of that?
His actions clearly show that he doesn't value their time together or respect her to that extent. Because if you so value someone and you value the time that you spend together, then you cannot have such interruptions. So it shows a lack of respect. And with the issue of setting boundaries, there should have been that boundaries set on their time spent together. So I see that's totally disrespectful and immaturity on his part. And indeed, as someone mentioned, many red flags. I wouldn't even worry to have a discussion, because certain things are supposed to be known. That if you value each other, you're out on a date, you're spending quality time together, and it's so secretive. You are interrupting our time together. Phones should be off, or, you know, so it's totally disrespectful, and that is not any
Thank
good
you.
sign of
Thank
a
you, Sister Patrick.
mature, Johnny.
Thank you for sharing that. Anyone else wants to come in quickly on that? Anything else anybody wants to pull out of that anywhere?
Yeah, I didn't
Go for
think
it.
that he really respected her, especially he's walking out, taking phone calls outside of her presence. What could be so important that he couldn't answer the call in front of her? This is his future wife. This is someone that he has accepted into his life, into his space, and saying, you are going to be sharing everything together. And he just walked out. And when she asked him, he just said, oh, it's a friend. But how could that friend be so important that you couldn't discuss whatever it was, whether it's a minute, 2 minutes, 5 minutes? Why couldn't you do it in front of me? So it must be something else going on. At least it would make me feel like something else was going on because of the way he handled this stuff. And being on the phone all the time, you know, being distracted by the phone, the time that they acquired together were not used to discuss plans for the marriage or the engagement or the life ahead or how they want to go about things. It was just a waste of time, I would say, because he spent most of it on the phone.
Thank you for that, Sister Agneta. And if there's nobody else wants to come in on that one, I think you've all made the points very clear. Red flag sums it all up, doesn't it? Don't even know we need to add anything else to that, but certainly red flag, seriously considered for that one. Sister Patrick, did you want to come back in with a comment?
Yes, what I also noticed there is that this behavior of his has been the behavior from the inception, because it says they have been dating for a few months, all right? And whenever they met up to spend time, so this has been his attitude, his behavior from the get-go. Why is it so far into the relationship that she still experienced, she has been settling, or maybe would have been giving him the opportunity to be more mature and respectful. But a few months, that is a very long time to endure all of that disrespect. And so if she had set boundaries from the first meeting, the first date, the first moment they spent together with the understanding that they want to be together, and boundaries weren't set there on that initial date, the first date, then we see the problem, his attitude, behavior continue throughout. And this would have continued throughout the marriage. You imagine you're in bed, you just relaxing, and he has to leave the room altogether to take a call, and then returns to say, "Oh, it's private. It's you don't need to worry about it." It's totally disrespectful. So she settled for that from the inception, which was wrong.
Okay, thank you. Veronica?
I was going to add that in addition to what everyone else has said, I see here that he said she was too jealous and suspicious. And he needed to address that. Don't just think that or say that in the end. Did you say, "Hey, Alice, I notice you seem a little jealous," or "You ask these things and it makes me feel this way when you do that. It makes me feel jealous and that you're jealous and suspicious when you do this." Why is that? Why didn't they discuss that? Because there could be a real reason that she could validate with receipts, or she could say, "You're right. I don't want to appear jealous or suspicious. I'm not feeling jealous and I'm not suspicious of your behavior. I'm totally secure in our relationship." She could say that, or she could say, "Well, actually, I am. And thanks for picking up on that. Here's what I've observed and why I feel suspicious and jealous."
Thank you for sharing that. Okay. I think we've covered it all. There's really nothing else for me to say here, except that, once again, I'll repeat, boundary setting is something that individuals must address. All right, so I suspect that Alice needed to address that at the very beginning. The minute she missed the opportunity, as Petra said at the very beginning, to make it clear to him that it was not going to be appropriate that he spent the time that they were dating. How are they going to bond together if he's on the phone every 2 seconds, as it sounded like it's happening here? Okay, so once she actually let him get away with that, let's just put it that way, then that's it, isn't it? I mean, the comment at the very end that, because he wanted to marry her doesn't mean he plans to abandon his friends for her. Well, what she needs to do is pick up her bag and run and be thankful she got away from that. Because to go into a marriage with that kind of attitude would be a very, very sad thing to do, in my view. So I think we've covered that. I don't know that it's anything else anybody wants to say before we move away from that case and go on to the next scenario, which is case number 3. Could we have somebody else who's happy to read this one nice and clear for us, please? Anybody is welcome to do so. Case number 3. Okay, go on.
Study number 3. Jill and Sam were newly married, both for the second time. Their children were all adults, married with their own children and living outside of their district. While on their honeymoon, Sam's ex called him to say that their oldest married daughter had become ill and had been admitted to the local hospital. This was Sam's favorite daughter. Sam immediately packed up to go back home after only 2 days into his 2-week honeymoon, telling his new wife that it was important for him to be there for his favorite baby girl, but that she, his new wife, should remain on the holiday so they would not lose all the money they paid. Questions. 1, list the dilemmas in this relationship. 2, how should they be handled? So what are the dilemmas in this relationship?
Yeah. Come on, folk. Give us your thoughts on this one. Go for it.
Dilemmas are that he's got his new wife, and then he's got his favorite daughter that's in hospital. So it's trying to keep a balance between the two relationships between the two of them. But for myself, I would think that it's kind of a red flag him saying to her to remain on holiday, because I think if it's a honeymoon, they would both, wherever they want to be, they will both want to stay together. So I think him telling her to remain on holiday and them to be apart in the first few weeks of marriage, I think is not really an advisable thing to do without sort of discussing it and letting his wife sort of decide whether she wants to come with him to support him or do whatever it may well be. So that's the first thoughts that came to my mind.
Great point, Eric. Thank you for that. Does anybody else wants to add to that?
Agreed with what Eric had said. Yes, it should definitely be a discussion that he needs to have with his wife, and let her make the choice if she wants to accompany him to the hospital or if she wants to remain. And as a second wife, and knowing the love your husband have for his child, and she has a mother, I would choose to go along with him. Let the money go. We can earn it back some other point in time.
All right, thank you for that. Anybody else has any thoughts on how they would want to manage that situation? You know, we're all different folks, so share your ideas. Nobody's going to beat you up if you have a different view.
I definitely think that involving the wife at that particular time gives her that what she needed as a new wife to show that she's important to him. Her decision or her whatever she thinks is also important to him, and that making this decision together would be sort of a defining moment for the relationship, because she's new. There's an ex-wife, and this is his favorite daughter. Now the ex-wife still has ways to reach out to him because they have children, and that will always be the case. She'll always be calling and reaching out for whatever, and any chance she have, she will probably take advantage of that. But he have to make sure that the new wife is involved and she knows that she is his wife and she values her, and he wants her to be around whatever's going on, that she's she's a part of him, and this is their life together now. So they make the decision together, they do it, handle it together, and the wife will know, well, you don't have any place here other than having our concerns together with the children. It's me and my wife now, we are a team.
Anyone else with any comments? Thank you, Anita.
Sharon, for
Oh,
me,
hi, Sharon.
yeah, I just had a family emergency. One of my daughters was coming back and she had an allergic reaction. So it was like, get her home, get her treated, get her settled. So yeah. My concern is the language that's been used. His favorite daughter, a married woman. So she's already under the responsibility of a husband. If his ex-wife is already there, then the daughter has got two people that should be able to act as a support network for the family or for her, until he either decides that he does part of his honeymoon. If things got worse, then he will discuss it with his current wife. But to use the language favorite daughter, that means this child will always be placed higher than his responsibility to his new wife. And I could see it later on becoming an issue within the marriage, that he's always bringing the favorite daughter above the wife. And so that leaving and cleaving is not going to be clear cut, because his favorite daughters, in inverted commas, is going to have a very heavy sway in his thoughts.
Thank you, Sharon, and I hope your daughter's okay. You said you had an emergency.
Yeah,
Sorry
yeah,
to hear that. I hope
she's
everything's
gonna
okay.
settle.
All right. Yeah, thank
I
you for
think
that. So thank you. I'm
I-
so glad you made an important point that I was hoping would come out without me having to say it, which is that we're talking here about a married woman with her husband. Okay. And we, that's really who we're talking about. Virginia, you'd like to say something. Go ahead.
Thank you. I think with him,
Can't hear you very well again. Speak in the mic.
okay, is that better?
That's wonderful. Yeah.
Yeah, I think with him speaking about him wanting to go to see his favorite daughter, it would raise questions in my mind to ask him, what's gonna be your role in being at the hospital at that point in time? I know we could argue that my role might be, well, I want to see her, but then she's got other folks who can support her perhaps just as good. And remember, we are actually on an important event, our honeymoon. So I would ask a couple of questions, to him before he goes.
Thank you for that, Virginia. Anybody else wants to add anything? Happening here is somebody said there was a defining moment for this future marriage. And when above his new wife, then he defined the moment, didn't he?
I'd like to hear from the men. Any of the men have anything to say about this?
Silence in the house. Yeah. Yeah, well, this actually happened, folk, and we're back to this issue of boundaries, understanding.
Did the current wife or the new wife stay, or did she return with him?
Well, she didn't get an opportunity to go back with him because it wasn't offered. So we have a husband, a new husband, who really had not included his new wife.
Right.
In his, it's really exclusion from that whole circle, and again, perhaps making assumptions that she might not want to be included. There might be even jealousy. Sometimes, if some partners think that a new partner is getting on too well with people who are close to them, it upsets them. So one isn't really quite clear what might be happening here, but what is very clear is that he's just decided to take total responsibility, walk away without showing any awareness of the feelings or care for his new wife.
Which speaks volumes of who he is.
Absolutely. Straight away, the marriage is set up for tremendous problems going forward because of a lack of understanding of how boundaries ought to be set and what really should happen. All he had to do was apologize perhaps and say, oh, I really shouldn't do this, but can we go back together? Let's go back and, we'll do this another time, or have a discussion and say, what do you think? And then let the wife say, but again, perhaps would have caused a problem. Let's say, well, her husband's there and her mum's there, just stay on the phone and, on a regular basis to find out how she's getting on.
Or FaceTime her.
Yeah.
Video
So,
call.
Lots of issues there.
And see how severely ill she is. And if indeed his presence is needed there.
Absolutely, but certainly a discussion with a new wife would be in order, rather than making decisions by himself.
Oh, okay, yes, definitely.
Yes, so definitely an issue relating to how boundaries are set, and I would question that because we are not talking about a young child here. We're talking about an adult with children who's married, who's got a husband, and it's almost he's almost saying that he doesn't trust his new son-in-law to take care of his daughter. So he's disrespecting everybody, in my view. Unless anybody else wants to disagree with that or add something. Did I see a hand go up somewhere? Go for it, Phyllis. Nice to see you.
And you, I was just wondering, would this all have been covered in counselling scenarios like this, or talks about, issues like this?
By who? I don't know. I mean, it depends on whether or not they had counseling prior to that.
Yeah.
I don't know. I wouldn't know. I don't really know what curriculums in terms of counseling made up of. I don't really know. Yeah, I'm not sure if it would be covered, Phyllis. In fact, I doubt it, to be honest. I don't think it would. These issues came up after they'd happened, and people are reaching out for help. And yeah.
Thank you. Thanks.
Okay. Anybody else?
I'd like to ask a question if no one else wants to speak.
Okay.
My question is, do you think the first wife is out of line for calling? It was she who made the call, correct?
Yes.
Yeah.
I don't know what other people think. I know what I think, but I'm not sure what other people think. I certainly believe
she had the right to call. Do you think she should have called?
I really don't. I think she may have used that as an opportunity to perhaps demonstrate that they are first, that first family will always be first. That's my view. I don't know whether other people have other views about that.
Well, I think that it seems like, I think it seems like it's okay for her to call, as in she's informing him, and notifying him that the daughter is in the hospital, but it was Sam's idea to leave and to immediately go and back home. She didn't request that. She's letting him know, I guess, as a courtesy, that that's the father. We don't know that she knows that they're on their honeymoon. We just, know that, she's just calling him just to give him the courtesy or the notification. But it's Sam, to me, who overstepped the boundary and decided that he was going to pick up on their honeymoon, of all places, not just a random vacation to go and be by his daughter's side. And I do think that this is one of those things that would be covered in premarital counseling, especially if both the husband and the wife are coming with children. That conversation has to be discussed, and the right pastor would go through these types of scenarios and ask, well, how would you handle it? This definitely would have been covered.
All right, fair enough. Okay, Virginia?
I don't see a problem with her calling. I see a problem with his response. Anyone could have called with any type of message, even his ex-girlfriend if he had one. But his response is what makes the difference, is the way I see it.
Thank you, Virginia. He obviously had a golden opportunity to step up and do the right thing and to cement an excellent relationship moving forward, and he missed that opportunity. Marlene?
Yes, I personally think that once the child is not dying, and she shouldn't have phoned until maybe a couple of days, or they should have watched and see what was happening first before they call the husband. And furthermore, he should have taken his wife. If he's going to go and visit his daughter, he should have taken the wife with him. That's what I think anyway.
Thank you very much for that. But I think we can all agree that clearly boundaries were broken, okay? And a future new marriage became at risk because of it. So, that's the point we're making here, and just understanding some of these issues really is quite an important point for us. All right, let's go to the last case. We're nearly at the end here, folks. There we go. All right, this is our final case today. So let's hit it. Somebody please, nice and loud.
Bill.
I have two offers. Who's going to take it up?
The male.
Oh, Eric?
Okay.
Giving it.
Bill, Bill was at home one Sabbath afternoon having lunch with his wife and two children for the first time in many weeks because he had been traveling as part of his job. In the middle of lunch, Bill's cell phone rang. It was one of his female friends, an old girl from before he was wed, who called to say she had broken down and could he come to help her immediately. Bill said, "Okay, I'm on my way," got up from the table, grabbed his coat and left the house to go and help his lady friend. His wife and children were left to finish their meal alone.
All right, you can answer questions, go. Yeah.
Identify the boundary dilemmas here. Suggest how this should have been handled.
Thank you for that. Okay, everybody, let's hear your views on this one. Don't be shy.
Oh, that'll be a no. That'll be a no. It is
Explain.
totally inappropriate. Let me make sure it's with his wife. Yes, with his wife. You do not stop everything for an old female friend. I'm trying to think. Okay, let me stop. Let me try to be balanced. What I would do is perhaps see if somebody else can help them. Maybe say, here, do you need AAA? Do you need, but I don't know that it's okay for me to stop what I'm doing. And then you put in the caveat that it's Sabbath. And so in my mind, I'm like, well, it is good to do good on Sabbath, but did you have to go right then? I'll be balanced. I'll try to be balanced. My gut says absolutely not, but you do have female friends that are kosher female friends. And if it was an emergency, I would think, because your female friends are now your wife's female friends. There's no your and his, it's our friend. They are now our friends. If so, we should help our friends if there is an emergency. However, did you have to stop Sabbath lunch to do that? I mean, she's already broke down. I mean, did she have to be somewhere? Is she missing a flight? Can she call a Uber, lock the door, put a tag out and call AAA? Why did you have to stop everything for that? Because that's what you do for me. That's what you do for your children. That's what you do for, I would say, perhaps an immediate relative. But no, that's a concern. And not only that, we would absolutely finish lunch and then we go together. We go together and make sure that you're safe and okay, and fix your flat tire or drop you off home until your car can be towed to wherever it needs to be. It would be together.
Thank you so much for that, sis. So we're agreeing here that there's definitely some boundary issues, boundary dilemmas. Go, Sister Petra.
This needs no balance. Or is this trying to be, nice Christian wife and give a nice comment? But this needs no balance. She's an old girlfriend. Why is it in the world that she's choosing to call my husband to go fix? She has to find some other passerby, some cousin, some in-law, some brother, neighbor, even the prime minister. Doesn't matter. You totally jumping out of your class. He's unavailable, and to have him immediately. She wants him to come help her immediately. So she has some control. She has some authority. She has some power, and he just responded immediately. Something is definitely wrong here. He would not. This is so disrespectful. And this former girlfriend, she's just displaying some sort of control and power over him, which is not right. So for me, as a wife, he would have been asked to remain, or I don't know, but he would have been totally out of place and disrespectful to leave and to go. She should have called somebody else. Even if he was the last option, then if I was in her place, knowing that this former friend is now married and settled with children, he wouldn't be on my friend's list to call to ask for such favors. Not at all. She was totally out of place, and he too.
Thank you, Petra, for that. We'll take Sharon next. I think we have, Sharon next.
Hi, good afternoon. I'm just enjoying this. It's the first time I'm logging on to this. Yeah, I'm looking at, Bill was at home having lunch with his wife and 2 children for the first time in many weeks because he had been traveling as part of his job. Yeah. So, and does this ex-girlfriend, did she know that he is home today? Why does she have to call him? Again, come back to boundaries. He hasn't been at home for a long time. It's Sabbath afternoon, you're relaxing, you're eating with your wife and children. Why do you have to get up and go to fix somebody else's, his ex-girlfriend car, when she could have called, as everybody else said, she could have called AAA or next family, a next friend. I'm sure she has other male friends who she can call. So he just have no respect, put it that way, because, his wife happy to have him. It's Sabbath afternoon. You want to sit down and chat, we haven't seen you for a long time. The children excited to have you home having dinner, having lunch with the family. So he just have no respect, put it that way.
Thank you very much.
As a wife, I would be very upset. And as everybody else said, I would get up and say, okay, I will come with you as well. Myself and the children will come along and we'll fix this friend's car. Yeah.
Thank you for that. Anybody else? Next hand. I'm not sure whose hand was next.
Hi, Sharon speaking.
Oh, Sharon.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
This shows that this gentleman, no, I can't even call him a gentleman because he's not acting a part. He has lost the plot because he has spent too much of his time away from home acting like a single man, and that his family are just his accessories. And that is very disrespectful. As for the person who phoned, I know that if you're in a panic, you will call, but you should have had like 20 other numbers on that list that you should call before you call, as a single woman, a married man's number. Regardless of whether or not he's your friend or your best friend from when you were at primary school, the moment he becomes married, there is a distance that you should have. We have a saying, how do you take your breath no square? That's a Jamaican saying. So for her to go to that point and calling him out on a Sabbath day, I'm going to tell you, I've had numerous experiences that when I was married. I'm not even going to explain it because I know this is going to go on YouTube. So this story, I've lived it. And it just shows you that the husband, because he has been away from the home, he has acted as a single man, making single man decision away from his home, and he's disrespecting his household by doing that. And he should have consulted his wife and ensured that him, his wife, and the children were in that car and made it a family trip, so that this lady knew that if there was anything potential more than just old-time friend, there is nothing, and that would make the wife and the children realize, because otherwise he is just acting as if he is a king, his household is like a harem, and he just gravitates outside. They are just blessed by his presence. He has shown such respect, and I'm hoping that it's not, because you're showing these stories, and I'm hoping that something was rectified out of that. But that is just a boyo behavior. I'm so sorry to
Thank
say.
you, thank you. I mean, the most important point that I'm trying to make in sharing these scenarios is that these things are happening among us. That is the most important observation I'd like to make. And when I talk about becoming more aware, I just want us to focus in on understanding how we may respond to these situations and what kind of implications that might have for us as individuals, or even for the community. You know, we have to respond to what's going on around us. And I believe as individuals, we can do that one by one, changing the world one place at a time, one person at a time. So really, that's the main purpose of sharing these. These events have taken place. And what usually happens is that a distraught wife rings up a good friend and explains what's going on and wants to know what they should do. So, you know, how would you respond to them? It's a dilemma. It's a boundary dilemma, and it happens among us. That's really the main point I'm trying to make. Was there somebody else who wanted to speak, whose hand is up? I'm not sure. I think we've got two Marlene's hands up. Is it? Is that, or is it one? Anyway, next person. I'm not sure who it is.
Marlene is there.
Okay. Marlene, is it an old hand, or did you want to come back in? Maybe it was an old hand. Anne?
Yes, I am listening to everyone speaking, and I'm just laughing because this actually hit a spot for me. But however, I'll just deal with the scenario here. First, my husband, I haven't seen him for how many weeks? That cannot happen. He will not be going through that door, leaving me and those kids behind. And secondly, I would ask him, can I speak to her, please? This is just me, guys. Can I speak to her? Where are your breakdown cover? How far are you? If you're on the motorway, can you call 999? If you're XYZ, can you call AA? You know, I'd have to really have a word with her, despite of the situation, because I believe he would be the last person that she should be reaching out when she's broken down. He's not AA or RAC, you know. Go and get your cover. That's what they are there for. That's just me.
Thank you, Sister Anne. Nicolette?
I think a lot of
stuff was already covered. But the glaring boundary for me is the fact that he's still speaking to his ex-girlfriend, and the fact that he jumped up to go help her also suggests to me that maybe perhaps she didn't know that he was married. I reread the scenario and there was no indication that the girlfriend knows that he is married. So perhaps he is operating in a way that he is single, or, you know, is available to help her at any moment. And his action of jumping up immediately to go to her rescue suggests that to me.
Yes, she knows he was married, and she also knew the wife. And you know what we sort of concluded was that this was a way of exercising her own power, if you like, and perhaps trying to undermine the wife's position. That's really what was.
If that's the case, then I think I believe that the husband allowed her. The husband allowed her to do that. Then he gave her, by way the way he treated her, the ex, and with all the communication, I think he gave her the rights to be disrespectful.
Okay, Petra, did you want to come back in?
Yes, I believe she knew that he was married, and I also believe that she knows that he was around, because it says that because of his job he has been traveling. So she knew that he's at home now, so he's available. I can call him. So she's well in touch with his itinerary. She knows when he's out of the district and when he's in and when he's available. And so it's not something that she just wondered if, let me try to see if I can get Bill. She knew Bill's whereabouts. So totally disrespectful, totally.
Thank you for that, Sister Petra. Is that all the hands now? The rest of legacy hands, I'm assuming here? Yeah? Yes, legacy hands, I believe. Thank you so much, everybody. Yeah, I think it's clear.
Sorry, someone was asking me the saying. What saying did I come out? Because this is a subject that's really sore one for me. What was the saying that I said?
If it's in the chat, we'll be getting on to that in a minute or two. Is it in the chat? Yeah, we'll be coming on to that quickly. We'll just wrap up here. Just for me quickly to say that we have clearly identified a number of boundaries. These are things that happen among us. In fact, every one of these cases were from Seventh-day Adventist families. All right, I need to make that quite clear. So, you know, that there are lots of issues, and what we all need to do is consider how we support people to make appropriate decisions and to determine specific boundaries. I mean, that particular husband, all he had to do was say, look, I'll call Johnny and see if he can help you, but I can't come right now. One little sentence, done. Okay. But showing that level of disrespect, as everybody else has said, most of you have said, to his wife, really did damage his future relationship, and was something they had to work through. I can tell you that now. All right, so we've covered those very important issues. All right, so just to wrap up here and say that, again, I'm going to repeat, boundary setting is everybody's business. And we all have to engage with it, whether we like to or not. And we need to know beforehand what it is we're going to do when boundaries are broken. You know, and if we don't understand, or if we don't have plans, then basically it's problematic. Red flag, problematic relationships, unhappy marriages, and you know, eventually these things just run straight through into divorce. Rates are going up, so we can't just ignore them. We know that it is God's special requirement. We know that because when God gave a particular counsel about a boundary, if it was broken, whatever he said would happen, definitely happened. Uzzah was struck dead immediately after he touched the ark. He had very good intentions. He meant no harm. Okay, he just wanted to save the ark from falling. And some people, well, David thought it wasn't kind of God to kill him like that. And, you know, it made David very frightened. All right. So, you know, that's the one I'm going to just stick with here. It is God's special requirement. It was given by God to promote well-being among us. And he does expect us all to become and stay as aware as we can. It does affect people's mental health and well-being, especially the victim, but eventually catches up with the perpetrator as well. These things, you know, they do catch up. And it's very easy because all people have to do is just put themselves in the other person's position. Now, would I like this? Is this what I would do if somebody did this to me? How would I like this? So I believe that ignoring boundaries is a plan of the devil. And it happens to distract all of us from our responsibilities towards God and towards each other. It disrupts our relationships, and it's a major cause of issues within marriage and relationships. It really is. And, just to finish off by saying it is selfish, and it is, in my view, unacceptable for anybody, and you hear it a lot, to say, I meant no harm, or everyone's doing it. Okay, and there is a statement I've put here: the road to hell is paved with good intentions, because you can guarantee that it'll upset somebody. And so taking a little time to be self-aware and to think, now, would I like this if it was being done to me? And just remember that we need to be kind and caring towards each other, specifically the people we've chosen to be in our lives as marriage partners or our families. Really, really important to be aware of that. Now, I've just added here one further resource, and some of you may know of this text, but there is an SDA text called Why Good Relationships Turn Bad and What to Do About It. And people may know him. He's quite well known in the Adventist circle, this counselor. There are other texts, but this was the one I thought I'd pull out because it covers a whole range of issues that people may want to tap into. However, I just believe that people need to learn to tap into prayer and into God's graciousness, and be reminded that we can actually choose to put ourselves in other people's place just be kind, but set clear boundaries so that we're not abused emotionally, physically, sexually, financially, or otherwise. And it applies to all areas here. All right, everybody. So thank you very much for listening to that. That's the end of this presentation. And Eve, I'll let you manage the chat, if that's okay, because some questions would have been answered, so you can just run through them. Is that all right?